Here is a fact that should not make sense. Passenger trains lose money almost everywhere on Earth. America's Amtrak has never turned a profit in more than 50 years of trying. It has swallowed over $50 billion in government subsidies and still spends nearly $2 for every $1 it earns. Britain pours billions of pounds a year into its railways. France's national rail company was sitting on 47 billion euros of debt. Passenger rail is, almost by law of nature, a money pit that governments keep alive because the alternative is worse. And then there's Japan. One Japanese railway company alone pulls in around $26 billion a year, with zero government subsidies. It moves 17 million people a day, and it turns a fat profit doing it. While the rest of the world treats trains as a public expense, Japan turned them into one of the most profitable businesses in the country. So how? How does Japan make billions running the exact same thing that bankrupts everyone else? Here's the secret, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Japan's great railway companies are not really railway companies. They are real estate empires that happen to run trains. The train isn't where the money is. The train is the machine that creates the money somewhere else. And by the end of this, you'll understand why the most profitable railway on Earth barely makes its money from tickets at all. Let me show you the 4 decisions that built it. Decision 1 is the one that changes everything. They call it the station as a city model. Think about what a train actually does. When you ride a train to go shopping, the railway can charge you for the ride, but it can't charge you for the shopping. All that value you create when you arrive, the money you spend at the store, the rent the store pays, the office worker who commutes to the tower by the station, a normal railway captures none of it. It hands all that value to other people and keeps only the fare. Japan's railways looked at that and asked a simple question: what if we owned the destination too? So they did. Take the Tokyu Corporation in Tokyo. You can ride a Tokyu train, take a Tokyu bus, live in a house Tokyu built, work in a Tokyu office, shop in a Tokyu supermarket, see a doctor in a Tokyu hospital, spend the afternoon at a Tokyu cinema, and eventually retire in a Tokyu retirement home. The president of the company said it plainly: we are not a railway company, we are a city-shaping company. We build the city first, then we add the trains to connect it. This started over a century ago with a man named Kobayashi Ichizo and his Hankyu Railway. His move was genius. He built housing in the empty suburbs, then ran a train line to it, then put a department store right on top of the busiest station, then added a hot spring resort and a theater at the other end to give people a reason to ride on weekends too. The train created the foot traffic. The foot traffic created the property empire, and the property empire made the train worth running. That's the whole trick, and the numbers prove it. At JR East, that $26 billion company, only about $16 billion comes from carrying passengers. The rest comes from the shopping centers, the offices, the hotels, the buildings clustered around the stations. The trains and the real estate feed each other in a loop. More trains bring more people. More people make the property more valuable. More valuable property funds better trains. A virtuous circle that prints money. Other countries run a railway and hope the fares cover it. Japan runs a real estate business and uses the railway to fill it with customers. Which brings us to decision 2, the cash engine sitting on top of all this. The Shinkansen, the bullet train. The Tokaido Shinkansen, the original line between Tokyo and Osaka, opened in 1964 as the first high-speed railway in the world. Today, it is the single busiest high-speed line on the planet. Around 365 trains run on it every single day, carrying about 450,000 passengers, roughly 130,000 trains a year on one line. And it is a profit monster. That one bullet train route generates something like 90% of its operators' passenger income and 2/3 of its entire revenue. The reason is brutal geography in the company's favor. That single corridor connects the slice of Japan that holds about 60% of the population and nearly 2/3 of the country's economic output. It also beats flying. Tokyo to Osaka is faster on the train than on a plane once you count getting to the airport. So business travelers pick the train every day by the hundreds of thousands. The Shinkansen is the high-margin engine, and its profits quietly cover the smaller local lines that lose money. No government check required. The system subsidizes itself. But here's the thing, none of this was always true. For most of the 20th century, Japan's national railway was a disaster, which brings us to Decision 3, the turning point: privatization. The old state operator was called Japanese National Railways, JNR, and by the 1980s, it was a catastrophe. Out of 200 lines, only 7 made a profit. The reasons were painfully familiar. Politicians wouldn't let it close money-losing rural routes because rural votes mattered. So it kept running, and even building lines into the middle of nowhere. And its unions knew the government could never let it go bankrupt, so labor costs exploded. Nearly 80% of JNR's costs were just labor, roughly double the private railways, and a private railway worker was more than twice as productive. The debt piled up until the annual subsidies cost as much as the entire bullet train network. So in 1987, Japan did something radical. It broke JNR into pieces and privatized it. 6 regional passenger companies and 1 freight company. And here's the detail that mattered most. They split it by geography, not by function. Each new company owned its own track, its own trains, and its own stations, all together in one region. Compare that to Britain, which privatized by splitting the tracks away from the train operators. A fragmented mess that's blamed for the high fares and dysfunction there to this day. Japan kept each railway whole, and then it set them free to do the one thing JNR never could: build real estate. The newly private JR companies copied the city builder playbook, slashed their bloated workforce by more than half, dropped the worst loss-making lines, and turned into the profit machines they are today. And the fourth decision isn't really a single decision. It's the soil the whole thing grows in: density and punctuality. Trains only beat cars when enough people are packed into a small space, and Japan's city centers are some of the densest on Earth. That density means a single rail line can move a staggering number of people into a downtown, and every one of them walks past the shops the railway owns. But density only works if people actually trust the train. And this is where Japan becomes almost unbelievable. The average delay on that busiest bullet line in the world is measured in seconds, around 24 seconds a year, across roughly 130,000 trains. A train arriving 35 seconds late is enough to trigger an apology to passengers. The schedule is treated as a promise. And because the train is always there, always on time, people build their entire lives around it, which sends even more riders through the stations, into the malls, past the offices, around the loop again. Now, I'd be lying to you if I said this was a flawless miracle. So let's talk about the part the highlight reels skip. First, the profit story starts after the public ate the losses. When JNR was privatized, the government didn't make its debt disappear. It dumped it onto taxpayers. Something like 14 trillion yen of it, and tens of thousands of people lost their jobs. The shiny private companies inherited a clean slate that the public paid to wipe. Second, this model only works where it's dense. Look at JR Hokkaido, the company covering Japan's cold rural north. It loses money year after year because there simply aren't enough people. In one recent count, 1 in 8 of its stations saw an average of 1 passenger a day or fewer. The government has to keep handing it money just to survive. The real estate empire magic evaporates the moment the crowds disappear. And with Japan's population shrinking and aging, that's a shadow hanging over the whole system. And third, this isn't some pure free market fairy tale. These are regional monopolies with capped fares and targeted government help for big projects. It's a carefully engineered balance, not a libertarian dream. So let's zoom out, because the real lesson here is bigger than trains. The easy explanation for all this is culture. The Japanese are just orderly people who love trains. But that's wrong. The Japanese love cars too. Japan builds Toyotas and Hondas. They take the train because the system is genuinely the best on Earth, and it's the best because of choices anyone could copy. Here's the proof. Every ingredient in Japan's model: private railways that own real estate, build suburbs, and capture the value of the land around their stations. That's not uniquely Japanese at all. It's a near-perfect description of the United States in the 1800s. America invented this exact playbook, ran railway suburbs and station-side empires for decades, and then threw it away. Japan just never stopped. That's the reframe worth carrying out of here. Japan's railways are profitable because they stopped being only railways. The train was never meant to be the business. It's the delivery system for the business. Millions of people, on time, every day, walking straight into an empire of shops, offices, and homes the railway owns. Everybody else collected tickets and waited to lose money. Japan built cities and collected the upside. So here's the question worth sitting with. Every country that runs trains keeps asking the same thing. How do we get passengers to pay enough to cover the cost? Japan asked a completely different question. What if the train was never supposed to make the money in the first place? So when you look at the railway where you live, ask yourself, is it actually running a railway? Or is it just missing the business that was supposed to pay for it? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to see how another country pulled off something just as counterintuitive with its money, watch this one next.